Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mr. L's Bell. I'm your host, Mr. L, from Mr. L's Tutoring and Enrichment, where a passion for teaching meets the science of behavior. I am a special ed licensed teacher for K to 8, and I'm also a board certified behavior analyst over in Massachusetts as a LABA, licensed behavioral analyst. And today's episode is going to be focusing on the schedules of reinforcement. All right. So, what is reinforcement? Let's really define that. And so, reinforcement is one stimuli that follows a behavior that, in turn, will make that behavior happen more often. All right. So, let's say you really like peanuts, and when you helped somebody move, your friend gave you some peanuts. Awesome, man. You have peanuts. You know, I love peanuts. Great. And now I'm more likely to help you move next time. All right. So the likelihood of your behavior occurring again is what makes the stimulus a reinforcer. All right. So that's a really specific thing. It is named a reinforcer because of the effect it has on the likeliness of the behavior. Not whether you like it or not, it's whether it has a chance of making the behavior happen more often. All right. So that is how you define a reinforcer. And so when you have a schedule of reinforcement, you really have two different things. Okay, so we have ratio. So a ratio schedule is going to be counting the number of responses you give and then telling you based on the number of responses, that's how many reinforcers you get. Punch card that you may bring to a coffee store, or the punch card that some food places used to do where you have a card and if you've come 10 times then you get a free coffee. So the free coffee is a reinforcer. The amount of times you come into the actual store and purchase something is the actual responses, the number of responses, and the reinforcer is what you get at the end when you reach the threshold amount. All right. So ratio, and that right there, what I explained to you is a fixed ratio, more specifically a fixed ratio. So it's 10 visits and then you get the prize. All right. So it's based on the number of responses. That's what makes it a ratio. All right. So we're talking about fixed ratio. And you can have more than just a fixed ratio. You can have a variable ratio. Now, the variable part, some people have heard before, maybe I always think of a variable loan or variable interest rate. Variable just means it'll change. It varies over time. So, one great one, actually, look at this, a slot machine. You're doing the same behavior over and over and over again. You're not sure if you're going to be reinforced this time. You're not sure if you're going to be reinforced the 15th time that you put in money and pull the lever. All right. So your behaviors, the ratio of them, they change. I don't know when I'm going to get reinforced, but I know eventually I will. Okay. So a slot machine is a variable ratio. All right. So now we have the ratio stuff. We'll push that aside. We don't need ratio anymore. Now we're going to be talking about the interval. So interval schedules of reinforcement. So in interval, you're going to have fixed, like a certain number of time, a certain amount of time needs to elapse, and that amount of time stays consistent. All right. So in your variable interval, the amount of time that elapses since you last performed the behavior has to change. Okay, that'll be variable. So you guys remember when concerts were going to sell tickets and you kind of have to wait at your computer and you have to wait until you have an available ticket or you can actually purchase something, but you don't know when. So you kind of click there, refreshing, refreshing, refreshing. So that is an interval that you don't know. All right, there we go. That's a time that you don't know. So you kind of have to keep checking every now and then. And then you can be reinforced by given the opportunity to purchase the ticket. Waited on the website, refreshed, and we're just like, hey, eventually I'm going to be able to purchase this, but I don't know when. So right there is an example of a variable interval. Okay. And you have the fixed interval, which is just the same set number of time. The one example I thought about this was Duolingo, because you get a reward every day for making sure you keep a streak going. Okay. That streak will only be continued if you come in the next day and you engage with the actual application. All right. So if you're doing Duolingo on Monday and you get the streak reward, good job, keep going with your streak. If you engage with it on Monday again, you will not get that reinforcement because you've already done it today. You have to wait until Tuesday. Once Tuesday comes, then you will be rewarded with a screen that says, hey, good job continuing your actual streak. So that is a interval that is actually pretty fixed. It's every day at midnight. So you can do that one. So let's take a look at this graph. And I want you guys to look at this. And you're going to see fixed ratio goes straight up because people understand like, hey, I answered this or I did this 3 times. I got reinforced. Awesome. Let me do it 3 times again. Oh, I got reinforced. And it's consistent. So that's why you see a straight up jagged kind of thing right there. So the next portion that you're really going to be thinking about is going to be that variable ratio. So I'm not sure when I'm going to get the reward, but I'm going to keep attempting to do something. You can see that's a jagged straight line too, because it depends on how many responses I give you. So that's why people are trying, or subjects in this example are putting in a lot of responses because that is what's holding the reinforcer, the number of responses. So now when you look over at the next one where it says fixed interval, you can see that time has to elapse for the reinforcer to be accessible. What you see here, that scalloped shape, I want to explain it from the bottom coming up. So let's look right before the 20-minute mark, you're going to see the responses come up. You're going to see them respond, and then they get a reinforcer. And then you see their responses kind of flatten out because you got the reinforcer. There's not a lot of, I don't really want something I just got. There has to have some time elapsed before I start to respond again. And then when I hit that certain time frame, then I get the reward. My responses taper off again and I don't respond. And then once I finish engaging, eating the reinforcer, whatever it is I'm doing, then I start to respond and I want something again. All right, so that's where you see the scalloped shape there. And now when you look at your variable interval, the one that's actually the smoothest line, you get steady responding because you're not really sure when you're going to have access to the reinforcer. But if I continue to respond, then a likelihood of me getting that reinforcer is gonna come up. I can't tell you how much time has elapsed between the last time I got the reinforcer and when I'm getting it now. But what is really clear is that if I stay consistent, I will get a reinforcer. I just have to stay consistent. This is what I think about when I think about people going to the gym, people sticking to a diet. Like the reinforcers don't always come all at once. They kind of sprinkle across the steady response. All right, just like you guys see in the graph, it's sprinkled across the steady response. So that's a really, really important thing about our interval, like variable interval, is it'll keep your responses consistent. And one thing I wanted to actually add, and I wanted to make sure you guys are aware, is that variable ratio is one of the most addictive things because gambling will give you that opportunity or that hope that this next roll, this next pull of the bar will get me that huge reward I've been waiting for and I've been working towards this whole time. All right. So when you think about it, a variable ratio is when you get the most responses or you get somebody responding for a very long time because it's always, and I always hear this from a gambler's point of view, they goes, I'll get it on the next one. I'll get it on this one. This will be the one. And they keep trying. All right. So that is very dangerous, but that's something that I want you to be aware of. All right. So for today's episode, wrapping it up real quick for you, schedules reinforcement. You have 2 different kinds. You have ratio, the number of responses that gives you an actual reinforcer, and you have interval, where a certain amount of time has to elapse. Okay. And amongst both of those, you have ratio, you have interval, you also have fixed, where it's the same number of responses or the same amount of time, and you have variable, where the number of responses may change, but you'll get a reward, and you will get the variable interval, where you're not sure exactly when you're going to be able to access that reinforcer again, but you will. And that leads to more steady responding. All right. So I want to make sure I cover those. And so I want to actually have you guys look and think about what are the kinds of schedules of reinforcement I have access to, which ones are keeping me in a loop, and start to be aware of how these schedules of reinforcement may fit in your life and how you can use them to your advantage when you're trying to gain someone's favor or motivate somebody to do something. The bell's going off. I think that's the end. All right, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe or share with somebody else who's interested in education and in behavior. All right, signing off. I'll see you guys later.